and gentlemen, we move to our guest speaker for this evening, and I'd like to introduce you to the stage. Bit of a legend around here, Frank Harkin. Oh, Frank, I noticed you're limping around today, and I actually asked Frank, I said, well, you got a bit of a limp on. He said, yeah, I did it last night in bed.
You know you're really old when you can roll over in bed and almost rupture a ligament. So
yeah, okay.
Not the best.
We'll believe that. Not everyone will believe it. Some of you would have seen the program for this weekend, and Frank, you wrote a wonderful article a while ago that was put through the press around the history of this wonderful club, and formed obviously in 1921, but rugby was on the agenda well before that for Eastbourne.
Yeah, for Eastbourne, a bit like today and even now, we're really lucky with the people that were involved in the setup of the club at the beginning, because they were very influential, well connected, and they made stuff happen. It's remarkable looking at what happened in 1921 in the sense of from the idea, the inkling of a rugby club in a garage to starting to play by May. That was just all came together in the space of a couple of months. But before that, there were guys like a guy, Colonel George Campbell, and he'd been a player in the 1870s through to about 1884. He should have been in a New Zealand touring side, but he had to pull out due to work commitments or business commitments. He went on and served Wellington Rugby Union and the New Zealand Rugby Union for over 40 years after that as an administrator. And, you know, when you look at the people that were there in that garage, there was the leader of the opposition. A guy, Wilford, was an MP. He was actually the leader of the opposition at that time. There's a trophy for Arthur Macklin, or Dr. Arthur Macklin, that the club still plays for. He was in that sort of original setup of people who are interested in setting up a club. And you kind of got to remember, in 1921, people were coming back from the First World War, and they wanted to get back into life, into some leisure time activities, and there was a huge drive to get back into rugby and get rugby clubs up and running. And George Campbell actually turned around and sort of said, hey, this club could come to rival Batoni, could be very similar to Batoni. And what's really worthwhile remembering too is that this club wouldn't have been formed but for the efforts of people who came from the Batoni club, like William Hardham from Hardham Cup fame. He turned around and basically said to the club, put a fifth grade team in, put a junior team into the grades. So they fielded a third grade team and a fifth grade team in that first year. But we had people from Oriental, as they were Oriental, now Oriental Rongotai, that were involved in our club, athletic club. So we were lucky with the people that were involved and put time into the club.
Well, and I guess this club in the situation that it is in Wellington, you look at the Wellington City and the outlying districts where it is, and going back prior to 1921, as you're talking about there in that era before the club was formed essentially, Days Bay, I've been thinking about the All Blacks, the All Blacks in sort of the early 1900s. Yep. That used Days Bay as a bit of a retreat. Yeah,
right from the time the first, you'd call them the All Blacks now, but the first Test match was played in Wellington. The second Test match the All Blacks ever played was played in Wellington, but the team was housed. They stayed at the Days Bay Hotel, which is Wellesley now. So they stayed there, and some of you may have seen that photo of guys like Dave Gallagher with their little silk black and white caps on. That's taken in front of Wellesley College. And so they stayed there for 3 or 4 nights and trained on, there was a hockey field there, they trained on that. So Days Bay and Eastbourne in general was seen as a great place to bring All Black sides, and that continued all the way to 1923. Get them out of the city, get them out of the pubs, because everyone just wanted to spend time with an All Black.
Get them out of the pubs.
And they just didn't have a lot of opportunities to spend time with people. So distractions, take them away, bring them out here, feed them up well, and send them out to win on Saturday.
You think of that 1904 team that played Great Britain, and then I guess a lot of the backbone of our national team, the 1905 Originals,
Yep.
a lot of those players who were there out here at Days Bay, well, they're responsible for the originals as we know them now.
Yeah, including guys like Dave Gallagher and Billy Wallace was in that team. And of the 15 who took the field that day, about 9 or 10 of them made that 1905 original side.
So fast forwarding through to 1921, this club you talk about, the garage on Rada Street, and Colonel George Campbell, and there was an All Black manager, I think, who was involved, who were the first Eastbourne coaches, and the 1921 Springbok tour. So there was a whole lot going on at that time.
Yeah. It was a very busy time in New Zealand in the sense of rugby. We'd gone in 1905 on the tour, and we'd lost to Wales. The following year, the Springboks went and did the same tour and beat everybody. And then in World War One, of course, we played against them in a King's Cup, I think it was, towards the end of the war. And then we actually went on tour to South Africa, which unfortunately was the beginning of our experience with apartheid, because one of the future coaches of Eastbourne was a guy, Nathaniel Wilson, or Rangi Wilson. He's the only All Black of West Indian descent. And of course, he wasn't allowed to play against the Springboks, along with another Maori player that was in that team as well. And you know that started our experience, I suppose, of dealing with South Africa as a playing nation. But by 1921, we'd had a world war, and we'd had that trip in 1919 to South Africa, and it was. The New Zealand Rugby Union was desperate to get them over here because we needed to work out who was the greatest rugby playing nation in the world. We thought it was us, and they seriously thought it was them. And so we needed that tour here, and so they came out. And so I think a club like this sort of sprung up from the enthusiasm and the pent-up desire to see world-class rugby, and we knew the South Africans were pretty good.
And South Africa came out here they were out here in 1921, and that series was 1-1 after the first 2 test matches, and the last test, I believe, was here in Wellington. The All Blacks needed to get themselves focused. They had 10 days, and they decided to set up camp here in Days Bay for their preparation.
Yeah, they went to the Days Bay Hotel, as it was at the time, and they were housed there. It was an interesting stay. I made a note today. I want to read this out so I get it right. I challenge anyone to eat this amount of food for breakfast. They would start with porridge, then they'd go on to bread and butter, and I don't know why, but then follow it up with toast. 2 chops and eggs, 2 steaks and eggs, bacon and eggs. And that was breakfast, and they went out and trained on that. Can you imagine trying to clean that up? It actually led to a really interesting situation later on where the owner of the hotel sued the New Zealand Rugby Union to try and get some of her money back. Not to mention the fact that the All Blacks, because they drew the 3rd test 0-0. It was a terribly wet day. You know, it was like the original water polo test. They came back to Days Bay and they got on the lash. And apparently, legend says one of the players stood up in front of people and drank 8 jugs of beer, one after the other. They were having crayfish as well, so someone in Eastbourne had looked after them pretty well.
Up, yeah.
And they trashed that hotel, and they did £350 worth of damage, which doesn't sound like a hell of a lot, but when you look at inflation, it's actually $35,000 worth of damage. Now, I don't think anyone really could have stood that sort of expense.
When you're thinking about the program that I guess that's the aftermatch, which sounds great.
Yeah, we learned from the best.
The program beforehand, this even sounds better. Like they were partying beforehand. The program that Days Bay had, there was a dance on Saturday, so that's a week out from the test, concert on Monday and Tuesday, and then live boxing on Wednesday.
Yeah.
How good.
So one of the original, one of the guys who helped set up the club, and there were a lot of people. I'd love to ask Mark how many people you get along to an annual general meeting. The first general meeting, they got 50 people along from all from all across a whole lot of clubs, obviously. But yeah, it was just. Sorry, I've lost my track. What was the question?
Well, you were dancing on Saturday. You were at the concert on Monday and Tuesday, okay. And you were boxing Wednesday.
So a lot of the events didn't go ahead. Thankfully, the All Blacks sort of said, "Oh no, we have to decline those invitations." The boxing went ahead, and they had actually invited the Springboks out to watch it as well. And there was a guy, Joe Heenan, who was connected with this club, and he and his father were great sort of boxing advocates. And it was obviously seen as a manly thing to do. You know, you played rugby, you boxed, and Joe loved his horses as well. So he was a big time gambler and follower of racehorses, I should say. So they had a huge week. And then on I think it was the night of the boxing match, the Eastbourne community had put together some funds, and they put some money together, and they presented a flag, a New Zealand flag, which Teddy Roberts, it was actually a really cunning, Eastbourne have always been really cunning like this. We actually threw this party almost and basically indicated that Teddy should be the All Black captain. And sure enough, he not only selected in the team, he was made the captain for that final test. And some people sort of wonder, you know, do we have any All Blacks in this club? And we can genuinely claim him as an All Black because he lived here. But to come back to how devious Eastbourne can be when trying to set up a club, someone went right out of their way, and to your point, Abby, this woman went above and beyond the cause of duty to help get this club up and running and attract a top flight player. She married Teddy Roberts. So she was living in Eastbourne, and he came and lived here in Eastbourne in 1920. So he was definitely an Eastbourne resident and All Black, but not only an All Black captain, and a good one.
Brilliant. You talk about the series drawn, so 0-0 because in that final test. So it stayed at one apiece because of the Athletic Park bog and the water. But I guess a good result for and a catalyst for the history that now the Springboks and the All Blacks have, even to present day, and how special is it that Eastbourne's had a big part of that?
Yeah, massive. And again in 1928, when we toured there, a chap with the surname Hornig, he was the manager, and he was also a resident in Eastbourne, although he was associated more with the athletic club, I believe. But yeah, massive connection with the All Blacks and the growth of rugby in the 20s. So yeah, this club's played a huge part in sort of hosting All Black sides, providing the environment for them, but also just, you know, building a club that, you know, we need to be very proud of the fact that, you know, as I did some research 10 years ago, I worked out actually there's only 5 clubs in Wellington that haven't amalgamated or gone into abeyance, disappeared, and that's Eastbourne, Batoni, Upper Hutt, Paniki. Most clubs have gone through an amalgamation or disappeared. So we need to be very mindful of the work, I think, that's been done over the 100 years to keep this club alive, and at times it's been tough, and the 85s certainly are keeping us in the spotlight, so it's great.
Yeah, well, there you go. Congratulations, Eastbourne. Give yourselves a round of applause for that, Rick. I'll ask you. I've got one more. Just before you step off, Frank, thank you for that. Just what the club means to you. You've coached here. You've taken teams from under 6 through to under 13, I believe, undefeated as a coach.
Pretty close.
What this club means to you?
It's great to see that the club's still going to the Taupo tournament. We sort of went up there. We started going up there just to play one team, in eastern suburbs, I think, from Auckland. And then we played a couple of other teams there. And then, lo and behold, we went to book the field the following year, and someone had gone, actually, we're going to have a genuine tournament. And we hadn't been invited. So we kicked up Bobsy Die and pushed our way in, made the final, and lost in the final to Hamilton Marist. But they emerged 3 teams to play against us, to try and take us on. But the thing about this club is it's really welcoming. There are people who are hard-working and keep it going, and we're always looking to improve. I mean, if you look at this club, even say 10 years ago, and look at where it is now, people are just putting in all this time and effort, and it's just moving forward all the time, and there's ways that we can just keep doing that and keep improving. And there's just great people here. Really great people.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Harkin. Thanks, Frank.